Well, we're going to change all this today with something we call iTunes. Because instead of having to put up with this, we're going to give you something that looks like this. Really clean, really simple, far more powerful. It allows you to have libraries of music. It allows you to rip CDs. It allows you to create playlists. And it allows you to burn CDs all in one integrated application.
The future of Apple Music, our iTunes, is not one app, but three. Apple Music, Apple Podcasts, and Apple TV.
With the release of macOS Catalina today, iTunes has officially been killed off. And I think we need to take a look back at one of the defining pieces of software for a generation. iTunes was actually previously named SoundJam NP when it was originally released in 1998. 2 years later, it was officially purchased by Apple and renamed to iTunes. And in 2001, they released iTunes to the masses. And it was set to change the way that we listen to and engage with music.
And all of this music with all of these rights, you can buy for 99 cents per song with no subscription fee.
iTunes was originally just the world's best and easiest to use jukebox software. However, in 2003, that would all change when Apple would get in contact with the 5 biggest labels in music and allow people to purchase songs through iTunes. Apple would go on to single-handedly reduce the amount of illegally downloaded songs on the internet with the creation of iTunes. It also created a very simple and elegant way to download your favorite songs or albums right to your computer that you could then put onto your iPod. At the time, that was the easiest way to do it. Now, if we were to think about that, it's a little bit ridiculous.
Cracking down on illegals. No, not immigrants. Music downloads.
Music downloading case. A federal judge ruled Joel Tenenbaum of Providence violated copyright infringement laws when he illegally swapped music online.
Have to pay massive fines to the music industry.
Pay the record industry $675,000 for illegally downloading and sharing 30 songs.
Basically, this sort of flipped the way the music industry had worked and turned it on its head. For years and years and years, pretty much since the beginning of music, you could only purchase a full album, and even if you only wanted to listen to one song on that album, you still had to buy the entire album. However, with the introduction of iTunes, you were able to buy a single song for 69 cents, 99 cents, $1.29, etc., etc. Being able to purchase a single song at a low price made it super enticing to buy music online because it's way simpler to just buy that instead of having to go to some sketchy site and download the song illegally. And without the overhead of these big record labels having to make the physical CD and put it into stores and have a huge amount of money invested in stock, they didn't have to buy anything. It was just available to download. And this theoretically made the prices of the music cheaper, which was good for the consumer, and it was good for the company and the artist because more people were willing to pay money to listen to more songs as opposed to just wanting to listen to the one song that they know they like. And the biggest winner out of all of this, beyond the consumer, beyond the artist, beyond the record labels, was Apple. In 2008, they were the largest single seller of music in the United States. And in 2010, it was the largest vendor in the world for music, all thanks to iTunes. And I think a lot of that has to do with the introduction of the iPod Touch, and the iPhone, along with some of their Mac lineups. But really those mobile bits of music listening pieces of hardware, people were really able to buy the songs they wanted and then download them right then and there and be able to listen to them minutes after they had purchased it, which I think was great for the consumer at the time. However, it wasn't all roses for Apple.
The Supreme Court has ruled against Apple in an App Store antitrust case. Apple has a monopoly over apps that iPhone users buy.
Class action lawsuit over the tech giant's App Store.
When initially released, Apple made all songs downloadable with FairPlay, which is essentially just a DRM, which is digital rights management, basically only allowing you to listen to that song you purchased on iTunes that's locked in with FairPlay on any Apple device, but unable to be used on any device that wasn't supplied by Apple. What this allowed Apple to do is essentially create a monopoly on the music side for their phones. It was frustrating, I think, at the time, but looking back at it, they never really had a monopoly. At most, they had 29% of the music market that was purchased. Yeah, that's over 1/4, about 1/3, but in the grand scheme of things, 71% of music was purchased elsewhere and was not FairPlay enabled or DRM managed. Basically, Apple had a lot of people get mad at them like usual, and then nothing really came of it. But I do think it's interesting to see that Apple has always sort of been in this you're a monopoly minefield with their software, because a lot of it is locked down and can only be used on their phones or their hardware. And when people got fed up with the DRM and FairPlay, Apple removed it, and other companies came into effect like Spotify. And then the push for streaming music became huge with the explosion of Pandora and Spotify alike. It's a logical next step. Everything we do is streaming. You stream your movies, you stream your TV shows, you stream your girlfriend, you stream your fiance, you stream your wife in a perfect world. I'm just joking. I love you, Carly. But basically, for most people, streaming music was a great next step. For me, I'm a big fan of it. I do know that a lot of people complain about Apple and their streaming capabilities because it's only at 256 kilobits per second, and I know a lot of people are frustrated with the audio quality that they get when they download some song off of iTunes or they stream the music from their phone directly. And this was a big reduction in quality from different forms of media that they were using and different mediums that they were using to listen to music, which upset a few people but helped out the masses. Over the years, iTunes grew too large for its own good though, and instead of being a music store of choice for Apple, it became far more than that. It became where you buy your TV shows, where you buy your movies, where you buy your music, where you sync your phone, and so on and so forth. And it became too much and too cluttered. And it still has that I nomenclature, which we know Apple is trying to get rid of. Apple Music, Apple Watch, Apple AirPods. I don't know if they're called Apple AirPods, but AirPods, Apple HomePod. All of these things don't have the I nomenclature in front of it anymore. Is that what it, nomenclature? They don't have the I branding in front of it because Apple is moving towards an Apple future, away from the I in front of the words. Pretty soon you're gonna see an Apple phone, an Apple Pro phone, Apple Phone 1, that'll be the next step in the future. The replacements are Apple TV, Apple Music, and podcasts. It makes a lot of sense for Apple to make this move. It simplifies what iTunes used to be into 3 easy apps, and it sort of brings everything back into line with what they were doing on their mobile platforms with many different apps, and iTunes is sort of shoved away in the corner where nobody ever touches it. But while this makes everything a little bit simpler and a little bit easier in my opinion, it also pushes us further and further and further away from owning our media. And it pushes us towards a future where you are dependent on the company and how you never own anything. You just rent it, you just borrow it. It's like leasing a car. You're paying a lot of money for a car and then you don't get it at the end of it. You give it back. You say, here was my $10,000 over 3 years. There's your car. I just borrowed it. Thank you. And this is the same with music, TV shows, and movies.
Disney unveiling new streaming service Disney Plus.
NBC Universal's streaming service in the works is called Peacock.
Apple TV Plus.
Warner Media has going out with HBO Max.
This isn't a good thing. I don't think people shouldn't own their media, because if you don't own your media, then it can be controlled a lot easier. And if it can be controlled and censored a lot easier, that's never a good thing. Obviously, this is a little bit deeper than normal, but I do think that it's important for people to own their own media, own their own movies, own their own TV shows, and own their own music, because always being dependent on a company to supply that for you for a low monthly cost That's great and all for the first month, but after you do it for 15 years, you're talking about thousands of dollars you're paying to these companies. At the end of the day, iTunes changed the way that we look at media, that we interact with media, and that the way media was purchased and utilized in the internet age. It shaped the future, it shaped what we have now. It shaped companies that aren't even associated with Apple because of how big and massive it was and how important it was to the world. Maybe not for the most beneficial reasons, but how important it was. Thank you for watching. I'm Scott with Techno Eclipse. Peace out.